Hey guys, just a quick note before we begin that the show may contain spoilers and adult language, but that's just because we know how to have a good time. Stick around, you'll be glad you did.
You are here for me to enlighten you.
You ever act like this again, you're barred for life.
It's just vile and base.
It's kind of embarrassing.
If you know your lines, then you can forget them.
Oh, I get it. It's very clever.
Hello, peoples, and welcome back to another episode of Esoterica Cinema, the podcast where we take films from the cinematic multiverse and discuss the hell out of them. But not today. Today is another bonus episode coming to you live with a man that is next in line to replace Keith Richards and the Rolling Stones, Mr. Jason Peters.
What's up, Ryan? How's it going, blokes? How y'all doing on this fine day?
How's it going, buddy?
Oh, not bad, yes. Yes, it turns out that, apparently Keith does not have access to the same type of cocaine that he usually does on account of COVID, and so he's not doing so well right now, and they've tasked me to replace him, but they did insist that I begin to speak with an English accent. I don't know how well I'm doing, but I'm really trying hard to affect it.
Not well, but it seems to be working out okay for you.
Yeah,
they're letting
I
you in the
know.
band, or, what?
So, here's the funny thing too, Ryan, is I was actually born in England, and it took me like 7 years to work the accent out. Because I was actually trying to be a child actor here in the States. That didn't work out so well, but cut to about 30 years later, all of a sudden I got this Keith Richards thing going on. So this is what I've been working on. I can also try to, I was thinking of maybe, because I don't need to be Keith Richards, right? I just need to be English. So I was thinking of maybe doing like something of like a Hugh Grant from the mid-90s, like, oh, yes. How are you today? Yes. Oh, I'm so nervous around here, but oh, I'm still charming, aren't I?
Apologetically handsome, yes.
Yeah. Me and my agent were working through a couple of different personas. I don't quite have it yet, but we also kind of. I'll go out on a limb and try here for the Cockney, but Roy and I've been working on this one too, mate. That's really bad.
That's terrible. Yeah.
That's the worst one I've done yet.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to sweep chimneys, I guess you could be a chimney sweep.
Chim chimmery, chim
Oh,
chiroo.
no, look what I've started for everyone. We just lost all our listeners this week.
Ryan, my friend, I am here to embarrass you.
Jason, born in England, came here, child actor, named Jason Peters. In the Rolling Stones, you are officially now the whitest person of all time.
I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere. All right, guys. So, one of the things that we do here on Esoterica Cinema, obviously, is we look at older films, right? We've got a couple new ones strewn in there, but we really want to look at just sort of the entire purview of cinema in its history from conception to now, right? And so one of the things that we thought might be fun for you guys here today is to take a little sort of old man nostalgia trip down memory lane here. And to help us out with that, we actually brought back a guest of ours who you will remember from last week's episode, actually, from the Green Shirt Podcast, Mr. Cameron Harrison. Welcome, Cameron.
Oh, that's me. Thank you so much for having me back, guys.
Yes, we enjoyed you so much the first time around that we just had to find a way to get you back here.
It's really the only thing that my imposter syndrome can't argue with, is being invited back to a podcast. So it means a lot. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and we actually are going to call this the 38th chamber, maybe? This is the
right.
38th chamber.
The cabin in the woods is the 38th chamber.
And if you don't know what we're talking about, listeners, shame on you. Go back and listen to our episode on 36th Chamber of Shaolin. I wanted to say Enter the 36th Chamber because of the damn Wu-Tang album every single time. So anyway, so it turns out, listeners, that there's a franchise out there that means a lot to sort of all three of us equally, but in different respects as well. And I have a feeling that for a lot of people in our age range, which we don't need to specify, they're gonna agree with us on this. I feel like this is sort of a pivotal franchise for a lot of people, especially that look at the types of films we do. And that's the Evil Dead franchise by Sam Raimi, of course. And you've got, obviously Evil Dead, Evil Dead 2, and Army of Darkness is the original trilogy. So that's really just like what we're talking about right now. Obviously they have the TV show, and I think they even managed to get like a game in there or something, or I know they were working on it. Yeah. So, which by the way, there is an Evil Dead 2 board game out there that I really, really want to get, dude. But it's like, yeah, but I think it's like already past its initial run, and so it's like $80 to $100 or something.
There is an Army of Darkness one. Is that the one you're thinking of?
No, this is like an Evil Dead 2. It's got like the Necronomicon like on the cover and stuff. So yeah, it's an indie board game.
For years for the Army of Darkness one, and finally got it, and it plays about as well as you think an Army of Darkness board game.
No,
but it's on the shelf,
guys,
spot of honor.
The Evil Dead 2 one's well received, actually. So, but
okay,
yeah. What would you got, Ryan?
Just get a Ouija board.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, yeah.
Recreate the
just
film.
Summon. Yeah, let's get right to it. Let's not dick around here. Let's just get right to it.
Absolutely.
We need to talk to Graham. Let's make it happen.
Got to be a Ouija board made of human flesh, though, and inked in human blood.
Hey, I know a guy.
Ryan is in Florida, dude. He can get you that, no problem.
Oh, yeah.
Pennies on the dollar, even.
Yep.
So like I said, this is a franchise that means a lot to the three of us. And I guess for a minute, we just kind of wanted to take a step back and go through a little bit of a nostalgic trip down memory lane about what it means to some of us old timers here. So, Cameron, I know you have kind of an interesting story about about Evil Dead. Why don't you go ahead and kick us off here?
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, yeah, just to give you a hint at our ages, I think I was the perfect age when Army of Darkness came out, like 11 or 12 when I finally watched it on home video. And yeah, I mean, that movie definitely speaks to that age and that, teen, junior high mindset. And I love that movie. And I remember my slightly older cousins one day being like, it's actually a sequel. There's 2 other movies before it. I'm like, what?
Gasp and Pshaw.
So I went down to my video store and I found it. I found Evil Dead, and I took it home and I watched it. And my life, I mean, that was a pivotal moment in my life. That movie, I always say, is the movie that made me want to make movies. Like, I went to film school. I threw away a lawyer's degree or anything else that would have made me rich and successful right now to pursue this crazy career because of the Evil Dead. And I think, I mean, it's just
thanks, Raimi.
Exactly, I know. It's just such a fun movie, and I think with a lot of movies saying like, oh well, you can feel the filmmaker's presence, you can feel the experience of making the movie in the movie is usually not a positive. That would usually be a detriment to a film. But I think like The Evil Dead is the type of movie where it really enhances it. Like you're watching the crazy experience and journey of the characters on screen, but you're kind of feeling what's going on backstage too a lot, especially when you're a nerd like me and really kind of dig into the making of it. So I think that's why it made me want to make movies. It just felt like these people were having a blast just going out to a cabin in the woods and throwing fake blood on their friends. And I wanted to spend my life doing that. So
that does sound like a lot of fun, dude.
I watched 3 and then I watched 1. And the only one I had left to watch was Evil Dead 2, which the internet's told me was the best of them all. And I went down to my local video store. They didn't have it. I think the owner said that people kept stealing it, so she just stopped ordering it. And I'd pester her to get it, and I'd come back, and she'd be like, "Nope, I didn't order it." And I'd come back another month and be like, "Do you have it yet?" "Nope, I didn't get it." So remember, I forget if this was on air last time, but I lived in a small town in Alaska, Valdez, Alaska.
Okay.
The nearest big city was 6 hours away. So I kind of, to preface the story, I went on my own mythic quest, my own Joseph Campbell's hero's journey to track down Evil Dead 2. And any of your listeners who are maybe 25 or younger are going to have no personal touch points to this story. I am sorry. This is a story from a bygone era. Right? Nothing that I'm about to tell you exists anymore. Because at the time, to find an obscure movie, you had to track down a physical copy. There was no streaming services with 90% of films on them. So I would go to Anchorage, Alaska with my parents on little trips, and if we were near a video store, I'd pop in and be, Evil Dead 2, do you have Evil Dead 2? Dead by Dawn? Nope, sorry, kid. Many, many times. And I forget why this one time was going to be the time, but I made a choice and a decision. I would find it on this trip. So we went to Anchorage, Alaska, 6-hour drive. I had my parents stop, and God bless my parents for putting up with me for this whole journey. I had them stop at, wait for it, guys, a phone booth. It was this glass box that you would often see on the side of a road with a phone in it. I went in there. I opened up a phone
Is that
book,
how you pronounce that?
which was a giant book with everyone's numbers. Can you believe this? Everyone's phone numbers listed. And in the back, there's a place called the Yellow Pages where you could find businesses. I went to V for video store.
Next, you're going to tell me there's like Blue Pages or something.
Whoa! Now we're getting deep cut. So yeah, I looked up the video stores. I found the video store page. I coughed and ripped the page out just like a scene from a movie. I did it. I took that page and I went back to our hotel room and I called up every god dang video store in Anchorage, Alaska. I found, I think, 2 that had copies, and one of them had 2 copies. So we went down there and we rented the video from the video store. And I took it back home and I watched Evil Dead 2. And then I think I actually called them up and was like, sorry guys, I lost the tape. Can I pay for it? I didn't want to just outright steal it, but I did pretend to lose it, and I paid for it. I think I even asked them, I had the balls to be like, since I'm paying for it, can I get the cover just so you know I can have something for my $20, which I'm sure they saw right through. And I forgot if I ever actually got it, and I think they only had one cover left. Anyway, so that was how I finally came to watch Evil Dead 2 after years of wanting to see the sequel to like my favorite movie ever made.
Wow.
And it was okay. I thought
oh man, that's surprising. We're gonna come back to that here in a minute. But also, by the way, I do just want to say, like, there could be an element of just impossible expectations that might have played into that. I mean,
very much so. But like that journey, I mean, it did mean so. Like, you know, to find an old movie, I think that was the last time like I had to struggle to find like a movie I wanted to watch.
Yeah.
And there is something about that journey that, like, yeah, it's about the journey, not the destination sometimes.
Absolutely.
But sometimes you're 100%. Those expectations could come into play.
Yeah, we talk about that all the time, where it's like sometimes, you know, the more excited I am about a film, the more disappointed I come out of it. You know, where conversely, if it's like, if I didn't expect anything, I'm like, wow, that was really good. Like, so, you know, expectations do definitely. It's funny that you kind of brought up that, Ryan, I'm going to go to you in a minute, but I just kind of want to, like, I'm remembering right now the search for VHS copies of movies that your video store didn't have. That was like a thing. And especially if you go pre-internet days. I mean, at least when the internet came around, you know, you had like eBay, right? And then eBay was just like, oh my God, finally I can get some of these things that I couldn't get before. But yeah, to your point, again, if you wanted to see some of these films. So for me, my version of Evil Dead 2 was actually Hearts of Darkness. The making of Apocalypse Now. And yeah, it was a film that you just couldn't get anywhere. And I remember just constantly looking for it and scouring video stores and asking, like you're talking about, and no one had it. And then, yeah, finally, eventually when eBay came out, I got it on eBay. But then it was like, well, it was almost too easy. Like, it felt like anticlimactic.
Right.
Now granted, I loved the movie. So like that was amazing. I think for a while I loved it even better than Apocalypse Now. But also Apocalypse Now is definitely, I think that's fair. But Apocalypse Now is a film that, I don't know about you guys, but the first time I watched it, I can safely say that was not the film that I expected to get. So it took a while to come around to it. But anyway, so yeah, just
ready
that
for this?
Go for it. Oh my goodness, no.
Yeah, I've never seen Apocalypse Now.
Oh my God.
Oh. How about that? How about them apples?
Dude? Oh my God. I mean, we have had some confessions here, but man.
I mean,
Apocalypse Now. Wow.
I always kind of felt like I got it. I get it.
Here's a cinematic confession. You've seen the best parts in like trailers and montages. Like, those are the best parts of the movie.
That's kind of my take on it.
Dude, man, we may have to do, I don't know, we might have to do like a separate, like, I don't know, episode revisiting this with one or both of you or something. Like, here's the thing, dude. Apocalypse Now for me, I think there's 2 films that I can think of primarily that are films that I did not love the first time around that were universally respected, but that something about it made me come back to it more than once. And now I'm like officially like fanboy status. Those 2 films, the first one is Apocalypse Now, as you can imagine. And then the other one is the original.
Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Right? No?
Almost.
All right.
God damn it, now I can't remember the film. Hold on. Now I can just think of Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. Because I just watched those films. I just watched all 3 of them not back to back in one night, but over like 2 weeks leading into the third one. Got it.
Excellent.
And then the other film was the original Blade Runner, actually. Yeah, which is a movie that, you know, it needs to be looked at through a certain lens to appreciate. And that could sound like I'm justifying it or, you know, making excuses for it. But yeah, if you're there, you know, we'll get into that in a different episode. Either way, Ryan, why don't you go ahead and tell us your Evil Dead story?
Well, I mean, for starters, my experience very much mirrors the two of you guys. Except I didn't take a dog sled or seaplane to go get it. I always, when you mention Alaska, Cameron, I just always imagine that's how you get around.
Mush.
I have such
Mush.
I'm not going to refute you. I want you to keep thinking that.
I mean, if it's any consolation, everyone thinks our cars in Florida run on cocaine and.
Well, that's a known fact.
Yeah. Well, it goes. I mean, we mix a little in, but not really exclusively. So
I just don't understand because it's so much more expensive. I don't understand why you guys went down that road.
No, it just washes up on the beach here. It's not expensive for us. Yeah. But yeah, I it's always, right. So it's always the shittiest video stores that you could go to back then that had the coolest stuff. So the more like big and commercialized it was, or if it's in a nice shopping center, they never had the cool stuff.
Yeah.
It was the little slums, the little dive ones, where it was like super compact, really small, and all the video cassettes were, shoved in like books in a library.
It pretty much feels like an adult store, right?
Well, I mean,
Right.
Yeah, some of them, like
very
most
seedy.
of the square footage was reserved for adult films, and they're like, oh yeah, and here's our like non-X-ray films over here.
And they had like the bead curtain,
Yeah.
that you walk
They're like,
through,
it's in the back, and then you go in the back, and you're like, this is 3 times the size of the front. Maybe the front should be the back.
Yeah. So, I did see, much like yourself, Cameron, I saw the third one first. It was introduced to me. So I was raised, kind of in a Christian household, and I wasn't allowed to see a lot of things as a kid. So my awakening kind of came in this era, very much like yourself, 12, 13, 14, you start getting to a certain age, and all of a sudden, Monty Python. They started doing 5 movies, 5 days for $5 at a lot of video stores for older films. And so I was able to, as a nerdy kid, go just load up, with 5 movies and go watch the entire Godfather trilogy at a clip, over a weekend.
Yeah.
And you got to change it, halfway through and put in, tape 2.
Yep.
They come in like the two cassette tapes. So, so I watched the third one first, Army of Darkness, and it was introduced to me as a, more of a comedy. And, that was also a time where you're in this intermediary, where, because the third one, Jason, and you and I have had talks about this, feels very schlocky. It's very Looney Tunes-esque, and the humor is way over the top.
Sure.
But, at 12, 13 years old, that's my wheelhouse. I'm all about that life. So it really played to my senses at that point, and then I wanted to know more about this and where this Ash character was coming from, because, again, it was introduced to me, there's more to this. Because Army of Darkness was never labeled as a sequel or anything like that, per se, on the box art, so I didn't know. It had to and there was no internet to look this shit up back then. So you had to do your own research.
Totally.
I mean, you really were like your own little Indiana Jones, you had to go on these adventures and figure it all out like an archaeologist. And so, once you find Evil Dead 2, then you realize that's kind of then the lines get real blurry because you go, I don't want to watch the second one before the first one. And your friends are like, no, the second one is kind of the first one. And then you watch the first one. But the first one was it was a milestone to me, Cameron, much like yourself, that stands out to this day as an example that you can do this. You can go make films. You can work in this industry, because up until that point, it's like, how do you go make Star Wars? How do you go make, Indiana Jones or Goonies or any of these larger than life, Back to the Future, or any of these big blockbuster popcorn flicks, Ghostbusters? But then Evil Dead comes around, and there were Jason, you and I have talked about this a lot, where in the 80s, horror around this era was kind of the auteur movement, right? Because the auteurs had all graduated the 70s and gone on to make blockbusters in the 80s. And so the new upstarts were your Wes Cravens. They were your Sam Raimis.
Yeah.
These, even the Coen brothers with Blood Simple. There were all these little thrillers and horrors and whodunits, because it was so easy, like you said, Cam, to go grab a camera, go out in the woods and go, throw fake blood on all your friends and have them scream and run around and, put a camera on a plank of wood and chase them around. When you see how these things were done, it seems so simple, but back then they were originating these methods. And then again, shooting on film this way was even harder. Because digital didn't exist, obviously. So, when you're changing film mags out in a cabin in Tennessee and, you've only got X amount that you could afford. So every shot has to be right, or you just get what you get. So the flaws are a part of the art, and you got to hide that and the cuts and all of that.
Or embrace it.
Yeah. Or embrace it, yeah. And that's why you get a lot of schlocky horror that doesn't make a lot of sense in a certain area, or you could pick out these mistakes that, you just kind of cherish those and really look fondly on them. And a lot of these directors have gone on to do big things and again, the auteurs of the 80s now are making blockbusters in the 90s. So you have Wes Craven making Scream, which is a huge success and starts a whole franchise, and Scary Movie. And Sam Raimi goes on to initiate the superhero movement.
Yep.
Aside from, Tim Burton's Batman and maybe some Christopher Reeve stuff, you got Spider-Man that comes out and blows the doors off the industry and shows Marvel could make a substantial superhero film. And now Sam Raimi's coming back to us. This episode is dropping on the doorstep of his return to cinema as a director, which we have not seen in many years since The Great and Powerful Oz with Multiverse of Madness and Doctor Strange. So, and also his return to hopefully some horror elements as well. So anyway, that's my experience. And I love all three of these movies almost equally.
Okay.
I think, Jason, I'm going to say that I like I think, Cameron, you'll agree with me. We had a talk before the show that we like Army of Darkness, I think, a little bit more than you.
Okay, yeah, definitely. We'll come back to that and formalize it in just a moment. So, for my experience, it was funny because I actually, I live in a suburb of Los Angeles, and we had actually, by the time because I was late to horror. I didn't really get into horror until late high school, let's say, or so. And honestly, and so that's actually what the Evil Dead trilogy means to me, is the Evil Dead movie. So you could argue that the seed was set by Gremlins, because Gremlins was like the only really horror-ish movie that I ever really got into. And again, we're going to see this as a theme, which Gremlins is kind of a horror comedy, right? And Evil Dead 2 specifically, you could mention, is definitely, and then Army of Darkness later. So, there's something about when the horror comedy stuff works, it's perfect. But anyway, so for me, I remember it was when Blockbusters were all the rage, right? You had Blockbuster and you had Hollywood Video. And Blockbuster started
late 90s?
Yep.
Mid 90s?
Yeah. Mid to late 90s for sure. I would say probably later. But 97-ish.
Damn.
Yeah. And so
late to the game.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you got a few years on me too as well, so you got to take that into account.
Rub that in.
And Blockbuster was doing like,
you'll be talking to me through the Necronomicon before this podcast is over. I'm that old.
But it was one of these things where Blockbuster was doing like 3 films for $5, right? Like they would do sometimes. And I had heard about this Evil Dead franchise, the Sam Raimi guy. And really, I think it was like, so I had a friend that lived on the street at the time, and she had like an older brother, and he was really into Army of Darkness, and he had rented it, and he was like showing me the poster and talking about it. And it was funny too, because he was talking about how it was all like wicked and blah, 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 and this and that. And so like when I finally watched it later, I was like, what the hell was he talking about way back then, right? Because it's one of those things that stick with you, like you're 12 and like the 15-year-old guy's talking to you. You're like, whoa. So anyways, I ended up, I'm pretty sure that guy got arrested at 17, by the way. Wasn't a good cat. So I actually rented all 3 of those and then spent like the entire Friday night, like watching 1, 2, and 3 back to back. And I remember it was like at the time, my parents had recently redone their bedroom, and they had put like their what at the time was probably like a 27-inch tube or something, right? Like it was before flat screen and stuff. And they had built like a little ledge in like the upper corner of the room so that they could like watch TV from the bed. And I was like, hey, can I borrow the bed for the night? They were like, sure, yeah. And they were probably happy to get the living room back or something like that. Either way, and just spent like 4.5 to 5 hours watching all 3 movies back to back. And it was one of those things where I had never gotten into horror. I had tried watching Friday the 13th. I thought it was fucking stupid. I tried watching 1 or 2 other ones. I watched Halloween, which to this day, I'm still underwhelmed by Halloween. Like, it's fine. I don't know if it's because, maybe had I seen it when it came out and that was not a template that had been done 1,000 times, maybe I would have been more into it. But either way, so, underwhelmed by Halloween, underwhelmed by Friday the 13th. Really, really got into Evil Dead. And that's also where I sort of realized what kind of horror fan I was as well. Because like I said, I had tried some of these. So I realized I wasn't really super into the slashers. And I was really into more like the creature features. So anything with like monsters, demons, ghosts, all that sort of stuff, right? Where it's almost like there's an element of creativity that gets mixed into the horror, right? It's less inspired by real life like a slasher film is, and it's more inspired by fantasy, right? But it's like dark fantasy. So, and then and just
Well, makeup effects in general, I mean, they're just makeup effects are always so fun.
absolutely, yeah. And that's the thing, watching the claymation, and I, even to this day, I love claymation, right? That was a thing that sort of, from Harryhausen in the 60s and 70s through to like, the whole 90s claymation motion from, Ugly Kid Joe to Clay Fighter, if you guys remember that game.
Oh, yeah.
I do.
Right? So
I owned it.
Yeah. And then, of course, all-time classic Nightmare Before Christmas. So, yeah, very formative experience from the Evil Dead series. And that would, I think, continue. And, like I said, realizing that I loved Joe Dante. And then actually, I really do like the Nightmare on Elm Street series. And that was one I got to later because I thought it was going to be more slasher. And then all of a sudden I'm like, whoa, dude, like we're talking dreams and like Freddy, especially you get into the sequels and Freddy's ginormous and, you got New Nightmare where like this, possessed hands coming to life on set. And it's like, dude, this shit's dope. Like I can way get into this.
Yeah. No, Craven and England added a level of panache to the horror series with the Nightmare on Elm Street series that, Jason, Michael Myers, all this stuff, they were just thugs roaming around in the woods, slashing kids that were having sex in tents. And then you had Freddy, and the ante just raised. So Nightmare on Elm Street was definitely up there with me. But you also had Clive Barker, which I was a big fan of, with like Lord of Illusions and Hellraiser and all these things. So because he added a psychological element to it, and the stakes were real. It wasn't just a knife through the back or whatever. I mean, it was legit.
Your eternal soul.
Right. So but unwinding it, this was kind of the gateway for me. Evil Dead in Army of Darkness and all that, because it was accessible. It was funny. It was fun. Ash was a fun character, and his wit and his humor, and it was able to bring me into that horror world, if you want to call it horror, which I would.
Yeah, absolutely.
In a comedic way that was easily digested for my 12, 13, 14-year-old kid brain.
Yeah, exactly.
So without heavy scarring and trauma and nightmares and all of that, this was an easily accessible way for me to get in.
And it continued forth to this day because I think, at the beginning of this season, we kicked it off with Dead Alive.
At the beginning!
And yeah, I think Evil Dead 2, kind of shares that same spirit, that horror comedy.
Right.
It's almost like a living cartoon, and it really captures that. So let's go ahead and let's wrap up this little segment here by sort of giving us, or rather giving the audience, our 1, 2, 3 in terms of our rankings of the film. And again, as our esteemed guest, Mr. Harrison, why don't you kick us off?
All right, so from favorite to least favorite, I'd go Evil Dead 1 is my favorite, maybe just because it means the most to me, but I love Evil Dead 1. Second one is Army of Darkness, super, super fun. Third, I don't dislike Evil Dead 2 by any means. I enjoy Evil Dead 2, but I feel like it's a little more uneven where like, oh, here's the horror part and here's the funny scene.
Oh, okay.
And again, it could be a big expectations playing into it, but 1, 3, 2.
Interesting. It's funny that you say that because actually I feel like for me it's flipped where I feel that way about Army of Darkness. And I think that Evil Dead 2 actually balances them out really well. So, Ryan, why don't you give us your ranking here?
Yeah, I mean, I'll kind of hang true with Cameron on this one. I think I'm going to go 1, 3, 2.
Interesting. So for me, wow. So my favorite to least favorite, we've got right at the top with a bullet, man, Evil Dead 2. Like I don't even understand how this is at the bottom here because Evil Dead 2 for me is a top 10 film probably of all time. I mean, I adore that film, and it's a film that it's probably one of the top 5 films I've seen the most. It's definitely one of those films that I discovered in my, when I really embraced cinema and just started moving past like the Kubricks and all of the people that you're initially ingratiated with, and then started to get into some of like the more cult stuff, right? Because I wasn't really into genre when I was younger. Genre of filmmaking was because I'll be the first to admit, man, like I definitely was subscribed to the school of like film critics will tell me what to like and how I should think about film, right? And so yeah, if there was a film that was like, considered dumb by the film community, like I would never watch it, right? Because I mean, I'm an esteemed filmmaker. I'm not. Now I'm like, dude, fuck that, dude. Like, if I want to see some stupid shit get blown up, like I mean, I could sit here and I could get artsy as fuck over here on the one end, and then I can enjoy my dumb action or horror on the other end, and it's like there's room for all, you know. Yeah. Sometimes you want.
We started a whole podcast based on that concept.
Exactly, man. Like sometimes you want sometimes you'll make a point to go get the $50 filet mignon from Ruth's Chris, and sometimes you're just gonna go get a double from In-N-Out for $5, and like both of those can just be as satisfying depending on where you're at, you know.
Totally.
I don't know if doubles still go for $5 or not. It's probably a little more expensive.
We're going to find out next weekend, buddy.
Yeah, Ryan's coming down. So happy. Or over, wherever it works. Yep. I always say, everyone always comes down from wherever, even if they're coming up or something. So, he's coming down from Mexico. Like, no, he's coming up. Either way. Yeah, so that's about it for our feature here on Evil Dead. Guys, appreciate you chatting it up here with us. Cameron, thanks for joining us again.
Anytime.
Once again, for anybody listening, Green Shirt Podcast, and that can be found on all of your streaming platforms, including whichever one is your favorite. So we're going to go ahead and kick it over to our good friends for their feature, Eric and Javon's Pros and Cons.
King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table is a story that's been around since the 14th century. In a time where honor meant everything and making sense meant nothing, we have yet another King Arthur Lancelot story. Join us as we retell this tale for the 87th time and go out of our way to make absolutely no goddamn sense whatsoever. This time, who do we have joining us for this challenge? Is it Lancelot?
Nah.
What about Merlin?
He was busy.
Do we have any name brand knights whatsoever?
No.
Anyway, if you want brave knights, we don't have them. What we do have is a disjointed, multicultural cast and a story that doesn't make any goddamn sense. Unless you're on peyote hanging out with whoever magical foxes are in the forest. I did like the fox, though. Join us as we break down the pros and cons of the Green Knight. And if you're more confused than you were when we started, then we nailed it. Hey, thanks for joining us at Eric and Javon's Pros and Cons. My name is Javon, along with my host.
I'm Eric.
And we are breaking down esoteric movies so you don't have to. Today we took the honor of the Green Knight.
I don't know how much of an honor it was.
The honor was all theirs indeed. This is a tale of 14th century King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. There's been various offshoots, WB movies, all kinds of stuff on this.
It is an artistic reinterpretation of an old-ass story that nobody cared about when it was written.
I gotta say, when it was written, it was the what was going on in the 1300s. I think there was a lot of black lung. Plague. Murder.
Invasion, Vikings. I think there was some tumultuous times, if I'm not mistaken.
Plunder. Let's just say that if you had an imagination and you could write these stories, probably, but they have no business still being around in my mind. We're going to go join King Arthur yet once again as the most impoverished, sickly King Arthur that we've seen.
I don't know that he was impoverished as much as he was just old. Like, we joined this story, he's old, very old. I don't know. So my pros and cons about this movie. Pros, sure, it was aesthetically pleasing. The movie had its some of the scenes that were shot, some of the costumes. That part of it was great. Somebody actually took some time to put that shit together and make it look pretty good. The rest of the movie, hot garbage. I would rather watch Spiral again than have to go through 5 more minutes of this movie.
Leave Chris Rock alone. I will agree with you that this movie was well shot. You could have paused this movie at almost any point, and it was very artistically done. It was very beautifully done. So I'll agree with you on the pro that its cinematography was beautiful. Con for me was character development. We wake up, we join Gawain as the lesser known, one of the lesser known
characters. The black sheep of the family. Con for me, they didn't do enough character development. Absolutely, I agree. It took me 15 minutes and about 20 minutes of Googling stuff to figure out what the hell we were watching. They really went in some weird directions with this movie. Very, very strange directions.
Yeah, and that direction is not making sense. We really didn't know who anybody was. We tried our best to figure out who the characters were. It's like watching picking a random season of Game of Thrones and having somebody jump you right in the middle of it. You really don't know who he is. You have to put together that his mom, who looks like Edward James almost looks like Edward James almost, and
you have no idea how much work you put into pronouncing that correctly, ladies and
yes,
gentlemen.
I just found out it wasn't almost, that it was utmost. I don't know. In any event,
he has a long history of doing that.
You really did have to do like some forensic detective work in order to figure out who the characters were and what they meant.
Con for me. So the whole thing is he kills the knight. The knight returns the blow a year later. We'll get more into that. But he even says, if you scratch me, that's what you get. He decides to cut his head off. Who the hell does that?
So what Eric is referring to is that a part of the movie, and this is also a con for making sense. The whole part of the movie is that the Green Knight comes into a room full of knights and says, I have this challenge for you. And the challenge is anybody that can strike a blow on me will get my axe, but I get to do the same thing to you later. And at this point of the movie, Gwaltry speaks up in a room full of knights who are like, nah, I don't see the upside here. Gwaltry steps up and says, is it Gwaltry or no, that's the Chief Bacon.
Yeah,
that's
you're way off here.
Gawain.
Gawain, you get this.
He steps up like, yeah, I'm your Huckleberry. And the king is like, are you sure? Like, did you understand that? Like, there's no upside here. You have to meet this guy on Christmas and he's going to do whatever you did to him. No, I got it. He proceeds to cut the Green Knight's head off.
At this position, I walk up and tap the guy on the forehead with the back of the blade. And we're done. I get your axe, I get the superpowers, and next week you get to bonk me in the head. Win-win. You don't cut the guy's head off. That's stupid.
Absolutely. Especially when that guy picks up his severed head, throws it on his horse, and rides off like the Headless Horseman laughing into the night. So
you know you done fucked up.
When Christopher Walken shows up.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It just didn't make, I got to say, con for me, it just didn't see why anybody was doing any of the things that he did. Basically, he accepted this challenge. So why did he even accept the challenge? I can't even see.
To gain favor with the king. He wasn't really a part of it. He was the black sheep. His mama was, I don't know. None of it made sense to me at all. This movie is 2 hours and 10 minutes long, which is about 2 hours and 8 minutes too much. Do me a quick montage of all the great cinematography, and then boom, we're out of here. Save yourself the time. This movie is trash.
Con for me was also the way that they put it together. There's a certain point where he goes to meet the Green Knight for his scheduled beheading, and he basically flinches before beheading, as any of us would. And
those of us who are cowards would.
Apparently my co-host would just stand there and take a beheading because he vowed it.
You bet cash, you lose cash, you pay cash. I'm just saying.
I'll keep that in mind. I'll be flinching and leaving, which is exactly what Gawain did. Gawain flinched, then left, then lived out his whole entire life, and then we blink and he's back at that moment. And he's like, I'm ready to die now.
Basically, this is 2.5 hours of learning he's a pussy.
If that's what you are when you don't want to be beheaded, sure. For me, this is a really deep cut on a very boring movie. I think if in the 14th century, this was probably great storytelling. We have way too many options. I would rather listen to Darius Rucker play piano. I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah,
that wasn't really a deep dive there.
Yes.
I'll just stick with my Spiral. I'd rather watch Spiral. That's how bad I hated this movie.
Fair enough. Spiral is better than this movie.
You know what? One thing I never thought I'd say. Spiral's actually better than this movie.
This movie is... No. Pro for Spiral. I'm going to go back. All right. Yeah. Pro for Spiral is that it's not Green Knight. I really am glad that we have some movies that we enjoy. This was not one of them. If you did say you enjoyed it, it's because you're trying to act like you're more artsy than everybody else. Nobody would do this to themselves on purpose, and I really think it was a prank for this guy to get back.
Who funded this movie? I think it must have got their leg humped pretty damn hard.
Somebody's parents who sent somebody to film school that doesn't have talent. And that's right, I said it. You heard it first. I'll never watch The Green Knight again. I don't like the Green Ranger from Voltron anymore. The Green Lion, the Green Lantern.
I don't like green lights.
Yeah, I can't say enough about how much this movie was not for me. If you did like it, get the help you need.
I agree with him.
Okay, well, that wraps it up, guys. I decided to spare you the English accent on the outro here. Instead, I'll just give you my usual high-pitched nasally whine, which apparently is better from what people tell me, though I don't quite believe them. Thanks so much for joining us here for another bonus episode of Esoterica Cinema. Hopefully you guys are digging what we're doing with this. Like I said, we did want to just sort of take some time out to just do a little bit of, talking about film as a whole and as a high-level concept instead of just really getting into the nitty-gritty, trying to do a couple, I don't think we really did any character work on this one today. Well, no, we did with the English accent, but just, trying some improv stuff out and hopefully having a good time. So if there's anything that you would like to see on these or moving forward, you're free to reach out to us. Got a number of different places. We're, of course, esotericacinema@gmail.com for all muffin and crepe related inquiries. We've got the Twitter and the Instagram at Esoterica Cinema. And then there's Ryan and myself individually. Ryan, where can people find you?
On Twitter at @TheRyanSiebold and on Instagram at Ryan_Siebold.
And I'm on Twitter and Instagram as well at Jason Aberrant, 1B, 2 Rs. Thank you so much for joining us once again on this bonus episode. We are going to be back next week with a traditional movie and breakdown for you.
Next year.
We'll see you then.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Oh,
we made it.
Yeah. Happy New Year. We did. We made it through another one. It was dicey there for a minute, but we did. And we appreciate you guys sticking around with us. We will see you again on our next episode of Esoterica Cinema.